Just because something is common doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Every single human will say that they have stress in their life. We shrug our shoulders and go, well, I guess it is what it is. I'm a victim to this. But what's underneath so many of our disease states is this fundamental lack of managing stress.
Sylvia Marusyk, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Absolutely.
We're super thrilled to jump into this. Your experience coming from, being the founder of Mind Body Works, being an activational speaker, that's something I'd not heard before. There's a lot of really interesting topics that you've really, made yourself an expert on in your career. I'm eager to jump into it. I think a good place to start, though, would just be having you give us a rundown of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, thank you. So I am an occupational therapist by training and an activational speaker by accident. Some people would say, I will say by divine design. I am doing what I believe I am on this planet to do. And it sort of came about in an unusual way. So I was working, years ago, I was working in work injury management. And actually, if we go back a little farther, part of the reason I became an occupational therapist was because I wanted to be a speech therapist. And I'd always had this interest in some allied medical health kind of profession, probably partly because my father had a lot of really devastating strokes when I was quite young, and I attended physiotherapy with him and just saw the effect of that. But I wasn't particularly interested in physio per se. So I wanted to be a speech therapist, and the program just was not coming to Manitoba. And somebody said, why don't you be an occupational therapist? And I said, would I have to give needles? And they said no. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that.
I'm in.
If I don't have to hurt people, I'm so there. So anyway, I really didn't know anything about occupational therapy. And then I got into it. And in the first year, heavy science, which is great. I'm a science geek, but I really didn't know if it was what I wanted to do until I started seeing patients in year 2. And then I was like, yeah, this is it. So fast forward to me working in work injury management with injured workers, trying to rehabilitate them back to work and doing work simulation and work hardening programs for them. And somebody asked for someone to do a presentation on stress. So it was an outside client who was looking for someone from the Wellness Institute to do this presentation. And I kind of stupidly put my hand up and said, well, I'll do it. And my boss said, okay, so you have a presentation on this? And I went, no, but I will come up with something. And so that first presentation was Manitoba Hydro. It was like a big corporation. And it was one particular department's safety day that I was presenting at. And they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And all of a sudden, Manitoba Hydro was booking me for all of their various departments' safety days. From there, someone recommended me to the Provincial Safety Conference, which I was fortunate enough to speak at. And that's the beginning. Shortly thereafter, a few years later, I got picked up by a national bureau and a specifically safety bureau, and then I started doing work in the US, and so here we are today.
Wow, isn't it? It's amazing how those kind of happenstance events sort of lead, and one thing leads into another, and you really find your way. You couldn't have planned that out,
I could not have planned that out. But I do remember the day I said, I wish that somebody outside of Manitoba would bring me in for a conference. And then I remember one of the first conferences I did outside of Manitoba was in Toronto. And that was my big dream, was to get into a bigger city. And then I had a dream and told everyone who would listen, someday I want to present at the Banff Springs Hotel. And I want someone to bring me to this beautiful hotel that I've heard about, and I want to speak to a big room of people. And then that happened. And like all these dreams, and then they came into being. And it's not so much about what's in it for me, it's the ability to have the widest reach. As an occupational therapist, I treated some unbearably sick people. I started in mental health and worked with inpatients. So we are talking people who are actively suicidal. I was on a locked unit. People could not even leave to have a cigarette without supervision. These were the sickest of the sick. And I thought the most courageous people I had ever met to deal with what they dealt with every day. And then I worked in a variety of service areas in the hospital with physically ill, medically ill people. And I, at a certain point, said, I don't want to see people when all of these things have gone wrong. I want to work at the other end. I need to be in prevention. I can't, watching people suffer caused me suffering. And I worked in palliative care for 6 years and saw so many young people dying. And I just thought, I have to get ahead of this. And that's what led me to really starting this just passionate crusade as a professional speaker on the prevention end of things, and knowing that the real pandemic in life is our inability to settle our nervous systems because we do not have skills to manage stress. That to me is really what's underneath the underneath the underneath.
You know, working in those environments, I've heard stories from all kinds of, frontline workers, and that amount of stress is just, it can be a lot. So you yourself must have had to, kind of build those techniques. I'm curious, what are some of them? We might as well jump right into it. What are some of those stress, coping techniques, or maybe even, fighting stress in a way? How do you kind of initially approach stress?
Well, I think one of the first things to understand is just because something is common doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Right? Like if you say to somebody like, do you have any stress? Every single human will say that they have stress in their life. Of course, it's that you just don't get to have a day without some degree of stress. So because it's such a common experience, many people say, and I hate this phrase, well, it is what it is. It is what it is sometimes the only phrase, but let's not forget that sometimes that is a way to take us off the hook for doing anything. We shrug our shoulders and go, well, I guess it is what it is. I'm a victim to this. I can't do anything about this. So because it's common, because many times we feel or kid ourselves into believing that we can't do anything about it, a lot of people don't take this seriously. But what's underneath so many of our disease states is this fundamental lack of managing stress, which creates an immune system and a nervous system that cannot tolerate so much of the physical and chemical and physiological stress that we deal with. So I really feel like this is a fundamental piece that is missing in the way we grow up. Because where did you learn to manage stress, Mark? Probably from watching your parents, right? If dad had 3 shots, and I'm not saying your dad did this, on a Friday night after a really crappy work week, that might be something that you would do because he role modeled that. Similarly, if someone had a temper tantrum, every time they got stressed out and got away with that, that might be a behavior that you adopt. It could be the reverse, though. You could say, I'm never going to do that because I grew up with that and I don't want to be that way. But regardless, there was role modeling. There's also what we learned from our peers, right? Everybody gets loaded, or everybody eats a bucket of ice cream after a breakup, or whatever it is. People do dangerous things when they're stressed. Like, we learn by osmosis, not because anyone taught us a specific and healthy strategy. So when we talk about what are some strategies, I think it's really important for people to understand that you need strategies. It is what it is not a strategy. That is not effective. Similarly, if you were to ask people, what's a good way to cope with stress? Many people would say, talk about it. Yes and no. I'm a health coach. So I'm actually going to do my part of the business a bit of a disservice right now and say talk therapy is not always the first line treatment for stress. It can be, but the timing of it is really important. One thing people don't understand is that stress happens in your body first. So let me give you an example. You're driving in traffic, the car ahead of you slams on their brake, you slam on your brake, and immediately you have a reaction. And that reaction is in your body before your brain goes, what the hell just happened? So your body immediately gets tense, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your respiration rate changes. In fact, the first thing that happens with your breath is you go, and you momentarily stop breathing. And then you go, and then you hammer on the horn, make some gestures, because your brain has now gone, what the hell? Why did that person stop? And then we make a further judgment that that person's an idiot. 9 times out of 10. And then we make another judgment. And this is all happening now with the brain. After the stress has happened in the body, the brain then says, not only are you an idiot, but you had no right to do that to me. And I'm going to tell everyone about it all day long. I am going to keep this stressful event alive and keep my stress hormones elevated by thinking about it, talking about it, ruminating about it, complaining about it, and keeping the anger alive.
So it's almost,
yes.
we can end up keeping stuff going far beyond the event, much further beyond the event, and keep it still happening in a way, because if we keep on repeating it, we're going to get some sort of memory of that event. So there's a fine balance between, talking it out and, repetitively revisiting something that should have been left kind of where it happened.
Right. Now, we talked about stress happens in the body first. That means we actually have to release the energy from the body. But now I have to sit quietly in traffic for another 30 minutes. And I have to get to work, and I have a meeting as soon as I get to work. So I can't discharge this energy. I'm just holding it in. And then by the end of the day, it's been such a stressful day, I've now compounded that stress in my body with some piles of more stress. And I have not released that stress. And this is just like the simplest, most rudimentary example. And then tomorrow I go to work, and eventually that's forgotten, and I have not moved that energy out of my body. So the next time somebody slams on their brake, or it could be a completely different incident, if these things pile up enough, I might have a blow up or an overreaction to something that has nothing to do with the event itself. Another example of how this happens. My daughter, when she was little, asked if she could bring home the school hamster for the summer. Someone needed to take care of it. And I said, of course. Yes, we'll take care of the hamster. And a couple weeks into having this hamster in our home, the hamster died. For 2 weeks, I was virtually inconsolable. A simple thing like going to the grocery store 2 weeks after this event, bumping into a neighbor whose kid went to school with my kid, asking me how my summer was going, and I was just coming into the store. I was instantly sobbing hysterically. I could not even tell that neighbor what was going on. I literally turned around, took my cart back, got into my car, and had to pull myself together to drive home. It wasn't about the hamster. It was about all the deaths that I had not fully grieved that were stacked underneath that. And all that energy came out in hysterical, body-racking sobs off and on for 2 weeks. And that was the last day. That was the last day. I finally discharged all of that energy, and then I could talk about the hamster, and then I could talk about all the other deaths. So had talk therapy worked for me? No. It was all still stuck in me, and I had not grieved those other deaths. And so let's put this into the context of the workplace. This happened recently in a production facility. I had a leader who completely lost his temper with his employees. Lots of blaming, anger, like very over the top reaction, very uncommon to see him this way. In fact, no one had seen him this way. And what I know is that was the energy in his nervous system from so many things that he had buried and not worked through, and it was all coming out because of one big stressor. So when we talk about the tools, we need to understand that stress is a body reaction that stays in the body. Our issues live in our tissues until we discharge the energy. Sometimes you can do that with talking. Sometimes you can do that by venting. But sometimes we need something that addresses the body. That might be going for a walk. I know that sounds lame, but that works. It might be that you need to do a breathing, just a brief breathing exercise to shift the breath. Because the first thing we lose control of in the stress response is our breath. We lose control of the depth, the cadence of our breath, the amount that we're breathing. Sometimes we're breathing too fast. Sometimes we're not breathing deep enough. There are lots of things that happen, but the breath for the human body is the operating system for everything. So if you lose control of that, by definition, regaining control of that regains control of the entire system. So a breathing exercise is a body exercise that allows stress to move through you and out so that you can then talk about it. Other things like acupressure, exercise, dancing, movement, tinkering, using your hands, even writing in a journal discharges the energy of that stressful experience through the motion of writing or printing or whatever, drawing, doing something creative, painting. I used to, when I worked inpatient psychiatry, I had patients paint and make collages to describe what they were feeling. It was incredibly profound. So we have to balance getting the stress out of the body with talking about the stress, talking about what's going on, so that we can come up with a solution.
And that, just having that discussion goes a long way, right? Like actually being able to go out and start these conversations, right? Or whatever outlet you want to use, right? Maybe it's not talk therapy, but it's art or writing, or there's a ton of different tools out there.
Yeah.
When you're working with organizations, particularly in the trades that mostly men, right? How do you start those kind of conversations when it's probably not the most encouraged thing in those environments typically, or the audience might not be so receptive to it for fear of, coming across as weak or whatever it might be? How do you kind of approach that?
So
Special thanks to our sponsor, BIS Safety Software, one of the leading safety and compliance software applications on the market today. We wanted to shout out the team for their new Lone Worker technology, designed to provide enhanced protection and peace of mind for workers while they are working alone. It includes features like check-in schedules, automated notifications, and you can designate supervisors to receive alerts. This Lone Worker technology helps round out the full scope of their safety management software. Lone Worker is just the tip of the iceberg. See everything they have to offer at bissafety.ca.
One of the things that works really well, particularly with those kinds of industries where, you know, I hate to gender stereotype, so I'm not attempting to gender stereotype, but rather looking at what the research says, which is that we operate from this perspective that somehow this demonstrates some weakness by those who are more masculine. That's categorically untrue. I always say, like, whatever you believe in, God, the universe, creation gave everybody tear ducts. And tear ducts, as a representation of displaying emotion, tear ducts are so magical because when we cry, we actually switch over from the sympathetic nervous system, which is what drives your stress response, to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and restore response. So we actually move out of the stress response when we allow ourselves to cry because of the biochemical and physiological action of crying. It's quite remarkable. Not that people have to cry. I'm just saying, like, don't stop yourself. I don't care what your gender is or what gender you identify with. Do not stop yourself from crying. It's like sweating. It has a profound regulatory effect on your nervous system. Just like sweating is a way that we detoxify the body, tears switch your nervous system into the rest and restore state. It's really, really important to be able to do that. I have yet to find an audience, whether I'm working with construction workers, tradespeople, manufacturing, labor, I have yet to find an audience that does not respond to an understanding of the science, the personal relevance, and the activational solution. I will have a lineup of men to ask questions or to have some private time with me after a discussion about stress. And that's not because I'm so wonderful. It's because it's hard to argue science. It's hard to argue personal relevance, and it's hard to argue simple, actionable steps that people can take to make their life better. And the science is really profound when it comes to safety, Mark. And this is where I think people can perhaps tie into, okay, this is very relevant to me. When you are in the stress response, stress happens in the body first. We know that. And one of the things it does is it changes your brain in a way that is, from an evolutionary perspective, extremely important for survival. But we don't live in the same world that we did when we were cavemen, and we began our life with this incredible stress response. That fight or flight response kept us alive. That's what it's designed to do. And from an evolutionary perspective, we haven't evolved our fight or flight response. We now know that we have two other states. We have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So we have 4 states. But essentially, we understand the stress response as a fight or flight response designed to keep us alive. So what happens, just quickly, the science of how the brain works and the tie-in to safety, is that when we are in that stress response, whether it's the heart pounding, brake stomping, oh my gosh, I almost died experience of stress, or if it's the low level anxiety that you're almost not even conscious of because there's a bully in your workplace, or you have financial issues, or you have chronic back pain, or you have all of those going on at the same time. So doesn't matter what degree of stress you're experiencing on either end of the spectrum or anything in between, we are running a program called the fight or flight response, which shifts blood flow to the back of the brain, the primitive brain, the amygdala, which is designed to keep us alive. Now, in this state, blood flow is being diverted from the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain, this big part of the brain right in here, that is responsible for planning, organizing, troubleshooting, see the tie into safety, hazard recognition, problem solving, all of those things, judgment, out the window. Empathy, out the window. And what starts to happen to us is we lose awareness of all of those things because blood flow is being diverted to a part of the brain that is designed to keep us alive. So this is the person who is stressed out about something and goes through a stop sign and doesn't realize it until maybe after the fact. Oh crap, I went through a stop sign. This is the person who fails to follow the safety protocol and has a catastrophic injury, which is something that happened in one of the production facilities I work in recently. A guy failed to follow the safety protocol, touched a product that was being produced while it was running in the machine, got his arm pulled into the machine, and sustained a severe crush injury. And then had PTSD coming back to work. Terrible injury, but for a moment, his frontal lobe was not operating, getting reduced blood flow because he was preoccupied about something else. And we can all relate to this. We've all done it, right? We've all gotten home from work and thought, did I stop for any stoplights? I don't even remember. We've all been in the car and had someone honking and waving to us and not notice them because we're preoccupied. Just the other day, this is about a week ago, I was very stressed out about something and spent 20 minutes looking for my phone, which was on top of a container of feta cheese in my fridge. Why'd I put it there? Because my frontal lobe was not operating. My frontal lobe didn't kick in and say, hey dummy, take your phone off of there. Why did you put it on there before I closed the fridge door? But that part of the brain was not aware. So when we look at the impact of a stressed out employee at work operating this way, the possibility of them hurting themselves is extremely high, but the possibility of them causing harm to others is also extremely high. So if you have, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, so there's almost a butterfly effect here in both directions that can kind of go on, right? So if you're extremely stressed, something occurs, you're putting yourself and others at risk, right? And to the same extent, if you are taking care of yourself really well, you can really have a positive impact, not just on yourself, but on those around you and also the future generations that you might teach those coping mechanisms to. So there's kind of like this web that kind of gets built out depending on what we're really implementing.
And so one of the things that happens for leaders is, and I just was speaking with someone from Wyoming this morning about doing a session for their safety leaders on this topic. What happens for leaders is they get a little freaked out when we talk about mental health and stress management because admittedly, they're not counselors. It's not their job to manage the mental health of everyone at work. That's your job as an employee. But as an employer, if you could find a way to bring that education to your staff, to all employees, how do you manage your nervous system so that your frontal lobe is online when you're at work? Knowing that everyone comes to work with every part of their personal life in tow. Their sick dog, their teenagers that they're having trouble with, the argument with their spouse, their financial work, like all of that comes with you. If we could, and employers will say, well, this is not my job to teach these people. Right, but do you want to take a moment and invest in a little bit of help for your workers on the off chance that you could save a life? I was talking to safety leaders from a global workplace or a global company. So they're a metal and mining company, and they have plants and mines and organizations all over the world, every country you can imagine. So I think we had 75 or 80, maybe 100 people in that room. And one of the people that spoke before me was talking about a worker who had lost his brother a couple weeks before an incident. And he was crying at work. He was openly depressed. He was now looking after the sister-in-law and her kids. He was grieving. He was openly distressed at work, backed a truck up and didn't stop and went over the edge into an open pit mine and killed himself. And this is an excellent company with an extremely robust wellness program. And the presentation was about all the safety checks and balances they had put into place as a result of this fatality. Like alarms and flag people and buzzers and this and that, but nobody talked about saying to the worker, hey, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna pair you with a buddy this week and next week and the next week. Or we're going to take you off some of these more dangerous tasks. Your mind's not here. We're going to support you to be at work. Just like if you had a back injury, Mark, we're going to give you someone to help you with some of the heavier lifts. We're going to put you on modified duties. You know, I've done this in workplaces. I've said this worker is not emotionally well, but they want to be at work. Can we pair them with someone who can be the eyes and ears and frontal lobe that they are currently missing to help keep them safe? Can we do that? And thankfully, I work in very progressive workplaces, and I've worked in these workplaces for 20 years, most of them. Yep, we got somebody. Supervisor's going to pair up with him for the next few weeks, and we're just going to monitor how he's doing and what he needs. So beautiful to be in a workplace that can do that. We need to do that. We need to not just go, oh, more checks and balances, or better safety protocol. That's not enough. When a worker is stressed out and their frontal lobe is not online, they need strategies to get their frontal lobe back online so they can safely do their work, or they need support until they can do so. So one of the things that I teach is I try to teach people fast ways, because we do not have time to do like transcendental meditation with astro travel to India for 2 hours in the workplace. We don't have time for this. I am in the middle of work. I know I am full of anxiety right now. I need to discharge this energy and get my mind back on work. How can I do that quickly? And that's what I try to teach, is quick ways of nervous system regulation so that you can pay attention, and then you can do some of the more intensive things. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's some relaxation techniques, maybe it's some talk therapy, maybe it's doing some grounding work outside and some emotional regulation exercises, maybe it's some journaling. That can all be done outside of work, but let's get your nervous system back online, get this working so that you are safe at work, and so is everyone around you.
You know, that story that you brought up is, it's heart-wrenching to hear, but almost everyone has, their own personal examples where they experienced something, they were a little bit out of it. And to your point, go through the stoplight, go through the red light, go through all of this. So, we can implement as many checklists as we want as companies, right? But
Yeah.
being able to work on a buddy system, to work on like really finding things that'll actually, instead of bubble wrapping the person or just making more alarms and processes, how can we really make sure that we're hearing them out and understanding what they're going through in a way?
Right. And the science supports this, Mark. The science of nervous system regulation is easy to follow. So when I talk about this to workers, when I do sessions on this, they're like, that makes sense. And I can show them in real time how powerful they are in regulating their own nervous system, how powerful they are in controlling their own physiology. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to look outside of us. Even when I deal with physical injuries in a workplace, a repetitive strain injury, I don't want to treat that person and then have them wait until I'm back in the production facility to treat them again. I want to teach them how to do it for themselves. If we can make people independent, accountable, responsible for their own well-being by giving them tools that they actually can use, wow, that takes a burden off the leader. Then I don't have to worry about it. You know how to regulate your nervous system. All I have to do as a leader is check in with you and say, how are you doing today? What do you need from me? That's easy. That's so much more doable than, okay, I've got to do some mental health checklist. I better remember to give them the phone number for EAP. And if they get angry and defensive, how am I going to respond to that? And what if they're not showing up for work? How do I have that conversation? Like, this is just, will it work 100% of the time? No, there are some people that have severe diagnosed mental illness that we may not be able to support in the workplace. They may need more help than any of us can give. But it is not up to the leader to try and figure out, what am I supposed to do with this person? We need to make it simple. Leaders have a lot on their plate. They are not counselors. They are not mental health experts, nor do they need to be. We need to give employees the tools to help themselves, but also the courage to say, I need help.
It's not easy to kind of take that step and say, I need help when you might need it. It's really not easy to put yourself in those shoes. And being a leader can be, to your point, just, you've got a lot on your plate. So putting that extra responsibility, or assuming that you need to also be a counselor or a therapist, which is something you're not trained to do, it's just, it's unreasonable to expect that sort of thing. What is burnout? Is like, that word is thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
right? You hear it all the time. What does burnout really mean?
That's a really good question, because I think it is a completely subjective experience. Like, you can't look at someone and say they're burnt out and actually know that for a fact. It's a subjective experience. It's when I feel like I have no more bandwidth. I'm going to give you an example of what that might look like. So, somebody who is normally pretty chill, pretty easy to get along with, doesn't tend to overstress about a lot of things, seems to just take things in stride. And this happened and is still happening a lot as a result of the pandemic, believe it or not. I am still seeing the consequences of what happened to us in 2020 and 2021. So you see some behaviors starting to slide. The person's late, taking a little longer on their lunch break. They're no longer sitting in the lunchroom. They're not really talking to people. Their facial expression seems either devoid of expression, or they seem to have either an angry or a worried look on their face. Maybe they're starting to call in. Maybe you notice that the quality of work isn't that great. Like they're slacking, or they're missing steps in what they're supposed to be doing, or they're taking shortcuts. That will progress to perhaps outbursts, losing their temper. It might be an outburst, or it might be something more subtle, like recently somebody told me that they were in big trouble at work because they kicked a garbage can. And I'm like, yeah, that's not cool. Because the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to yell at someone, or you're going to do worse. So yeah, kicking a garbage can is a highly aggressive act when you're doing it in front of people that suggests that you are not regulating your nervous system. That's when you start to think about, ooh, I wonder if they're just feeling burnt out because they're not managing the daily demands of life very well. So I think, to me, burnout is when your social, emotional, and physical bandwidth is so reduced that you're barely able to get through the requirements, the things that have to be done in a day, and you really don't have the bandwidth for the things that you used to love to do. I think that's a really good, to me, that's a really good measure of whether or not I'm burnt out. And I would say that for me, one of the big things is like having difficulty regulating my emotional state. When I find that the simplest things, and this is a very common thing that happens when blood flow is diverted to the back of the brain, which is designed to keep us alive, you start to get paranoid about things like, is this happening because, you know, I did this? Like, why is everything bad happening to me? Getting into that state of mind where you're a victim, that's a sure sign of burnout. That's like, shut the world out and take some time to recharge. And the body is really interesting. The human body is really interesting. If you are not recharging, there is a period where you can push and push and push and push the limit, and then your body will say, okay, that's enough. So you can steal energy from other processes in your body to keep doing all of your daily activities. But if you don't recharge at a certain point, you can only steal so much energy, and then your body will shut you down and you'll get sick and you'll be forced to take a break. And when that's happened to me in the past, I have had to learn humbly to say thank you to my body for the gift of rest. Instead of being angry and resentful that I'm sick, I did it to myself. I didn't care for myself.
That's a powerful message there, to really listen to yourself and your own body. And from what I can tell and from hearing you speak, and obviously your story there, it's had a tremendous impact on your own life, being able to listen to yourself and your own body and really take what you've learned and apply it to yourself. And then that's going to help you share the message further with other people when you're going to speak to them. I want to thank you again, Sylvia, for coming on and being willing to share all of your knowledge and your experience with us. Where can people find your work and what you're up to?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you so much for having me. I deeply appreciate the chance to talk about not just what I do, but what means something to me. It's what I do is what I am, right? Like this is my calling. This is what I'm on this planet to do. So I appreciate the chance to talk about these things because people need this information. They need help. We all need help. So where people can find me is at mindbodyworks.ca. You can email me at sylvia@mindbodyworks.ca. I do have a book that we haven't talked about. It is it's a book based on the principle of literally changing your brain. So understanding the science of, the word is escaping me right now, but it's It's using the understanding of neurology, basically, how we create these pathways in the brain, and understanding that we can change the way we think.
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah, thank you. So interestingly enough, changing thoughts is far harder than changing actions. It's the hardest thing to change. We can change our actions. We can decide not to wrap our fingers around the throat that someone's, when someone's ticking us off. But it's really hard to stop the thought that you want to do that. So if you can stop your thoughts and have them change direction, you can literally transform your physiology. This is too long to get into, but I'll just tell you very quickly, humans on average think about 60,000 thoughts per day. Of those 60,000 thoughts, 80% of them are negative, and 90% of those are on repeat. Every negative thought has a biochemical signature in your body that is like a tiny little drop of poison in the water hole that adds up over time and is corrosive to our well-being. So if you could change your default thoughts from negative to more positive, you would directly, physiologically, change your health in real time, every single time you have a thought. That to me is fascinating. It takes very little time using the principles of neuroplasticity to change the way your brain looks at the world. So what I did was I wrote a book that takes about 20 seconds per day. It's a 365-day read, if you will. Every day you get 1, 20, or 30-second page to read. It tells you what to do with that information that you've just learned. It sets an intention for your day, and that will rewire your brain over, it won't take 365 days, but you'll be unrecognizable after 365 days.
That sounds, what's it called?
Testing Positive, 365 Days of Calm Through Chaos. And it's on Amazon.
Love it.
Yeah.
Sylvia, really appreciate your time today. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Take good care.